She was sunshine in scrubs, a pharmacist who dedicated her life to saving others and brightened every hallway she walked through. But in the summer of 2023, someone was watching her kindness fade, not with love, but with calculation. For 10 days, a man who promised to protect her sat behind a screen planning her death, searching doses, chemicals, and how to erase his tracks. His name was Dr. Jo Bowman, her husband. What began as a picture-perfect love story at the world-famous Mayo Clinic would end in one of Minnesota's most chilling cases of premeditated murder, a story where medicine became murder and trust turned to poison. I'm your host, and this is the Guilty Crime Stories. Tonight, we unravel the 10 days that turned a marriage into a murder plan. Before the headlines, before the investigation, there was just Betty Jo Sponsel, a small-town girl from Wichita, Kansas, born December 13th, 1990. Those who knew her say she had a light about her, not the loud look-at-me kind, but the quiet, steady glow that made people feel safe just being near her. At Bishop Carroll Catholic High School, she was the one everyone went to when they needed help with homework, or just a little kindness in their day. Teachers called her the student who never stopped smiling, and that smile, that kindness, would follow her through life. Betty worked hard. She wasn't just chasing grades, she was chasing purpose. Her dream to help people heal. That's what led her to the University of Kansas School of Pharmacy, where she poured herself into her studies, late nights, endless exams, and the kind of pressure only future healthcare workers understand. In 2017, she finally earned her doctorate in pharmacy. It was the proudest day of her life. One of her mentors later said she was so sharp, reliable, the kind of pharmacist every patient deserves. But Betty was more than her white coat. She loved life, road trips to Yosemite, sunrises in Hawaii, the icy blue glow of Icelandic waterfalls, and then there was her corgi, Sir Crumpet II of Mulberry, her loyal little shadow who greeted her at the door after every hospital shift. Friends say Betty could find beauty in the smallest moments, a rainbow after rain, a song on the radio, or a random act of kindness from a stranger. Even her last message to a friend, a week before she died, was pure Betty. She said, "I saw a double rainbow this morning before work. I hope you find something beautiful in your day too." That was her, light, even in the smallest places. But the person who should have treasured that light the most was already planning to extinguish it. At the height of her career, when Betty's world seemed full of promise, she met Connor Fitzgerald Bowman. He was the picture of ambition, a medical student with a confident smile and a sharp mind. Colleagues described him as brilliant, methodical, and always one step ahead in every discussion. To friends and family, it looked like a perfect match, a pharmacist and a doctor. Two healers, two dreamers, two young professionals building a life around medicine, purpose, and each other. They met while training at the Mayo Clinic, one of the most prestigious medical institutions in the world, the kind of place where only the best of the best get in. Connor admired her dedication. Betty admired his intelligence. Together, they looked unstoppable. In 2021, they got married, a beautiful ceremony at Rhapsody in Independence, Missouri. Family photos show nothing but joy. Her laughter, his arm around her, the kind of love story people post with hashtags like Chipower Couple and She Meant Toby. They moved to Rochester, Minnesota to start their new chapter. Betty began working in the operating room pharmacy at Mayo, handling high-stakes procedures where precision meant life or death. Connor, meanwhile, was deep into his internal medicine residency. Friends say they seemed like the dream team, young, accomplished, living in a quiet neighborhood with their corgi, Grumpet. To the outside world, everything looked perfect, but perfection often hides pressure. Behind the smiles and matching scrubs, there were late-night arguments, growing financial strain, and long hospital hours that left little time for love. Connor carried the weight of massive medical school debt, nearly $500,000. The couple kept separate bank accounts, a quiet sign of growing distance. Still, no one saw the storm coming. Betty believed in fixing things, not giving up. But Connor was already slipping into something darker, something that no one around him could yet see. At first, the Bowmans looked like they had it all. Good jobs, a comfortable home, a future full of promise. But behind that picture-perfect life, something was breaking, slowly, quietly. By mid-2023, the glow was gone. The couple's text messages turned from "love you" to "we need to talk." Connor's debt, hundreds of thousands of dollars from medical school, hung over them like a storm cloud. Betty had worked hard for her career, and her success was steady. But Connor felt trapped under the weight of his own expectations. He'd spent years surrounded by brilliance at the Mayo Clinic. But instead of inspiration, it started breeding resentment. He was supposed to be the rising star. Yet it was Betty whose laughter filled rooms, whose kindness drew people in. Friends later said that Betty had started confiding in a few close colleagues. The marriage, she admitted, wasn't what it seemed. There were arguments about money, about respect, about where their lives were heading. They had begun discussing divorce. Betty wanted peace. Connor wanted control. But the most chilling part? Even as the relationship crumbled, Betty never believed she was in danger. She was the kind of woman who believed in fixing things, in giving people second chances. And Connor knew that. He knew her faith in him. He knew her routines. He knew her trust, and he would use every bit of it. By late July 2023, things had become tense enough that friends noticed her pulling away. Her usual spark dimmed, her smiles shorter. Still, she never spoke a word of fear. To everyone else, it looked like another young couple under stress. But in Connor's mind, something had already shifted. The idea of divorce wasn't a heartbreak. It was a problem to be solved. And as a poison control specialist, he knew exactly how to solve it. August 5th, 2023. While Betty was at work, saving lives in the operating room pharmacy, Connor Bowman was sitting at home, planning how to take one. Investigators would later call this day one. His laptop, his tool of death, his first search. Can browsing history be used in court? That one sentence revealed everything. It wasn't a moment of rage. It was strategy. From that point, every click, every search, every late-night session built the blueprint of what would become one of Minnesota's most premeditated murders. Connor was a poison control specialist. He knew what most people didn't, how small amounts of certain drugs could look like something else. Entirely, he started researching how to make poisoning look like food poisoning, how long colchicine takes to kill, how to track a package anonymously. He even calculated, down to the decimal, Betty's exact body weight in kilograms, because in toxicology, the lethal dose depends on weight. He wasn't guessing. He was doing the math. On August 10th, the first test run, Connor prepared a smoothie, something he'd never done before. Betty took a sip, frowned, said it tasted strange. She even joked to a friend, "He's probably trying to poison me." None of them knew how close to the truth that joke really was. Later that day, Connor's computer history showed more searches. Colchicine toxicity, sodium nitrate lethal dose, and how to buy restricted substances online. He wasn't looking for information anymore. He was looking for access. On August 11th, he made his move. Using his Mayo Clinic employee email, Connor ordered a small vial of liquid colchicine, a drug used to treat gout, but fatal in high doses. Cost? $50 to $20. That's all it took to buy the weapon that would end his wife's life. Prosecutors later said he didn't just order it recklessly. He timed it. He tracked the shipment. He knew exactly when it would arrive. Over the next few days, his searches grew even darker. Widower, is that gender neutral? Life insurance payout after sudden death, how to destroy. Internet history permanently. Connor wasn't planning a murder anymore. So he was planning the aftermath. He was already imagining himself as a free man, a widower, a doctor, a man with $500,000 and no one left to question him. August 10th started like any other morning in the Bowman household. The kind of ordinary day that makes the worst betrayals feel impossibly surreal in hindsight. Connor did something he almost never did. He made a drink for Betty, a smoothie. A small, everyday gesture that should have meant care. Instead, it became a test. Betty took one sip and immediately recoiled. "This tastes weird," she told him. It was an odd moment because Connor was not a man known for silly pranks or kitchen experiments. Friends later said he rarely cooked anything for anyone. Alarmed, Betty handed the cup to a friend who was visiting, an attempt to laugh it off. The friend tasted it and grimaced too. They tossed the rest. Someone joked, a nervous, flippant thing friends say when they don't want to admit fear. "Are you trying to poison me?" They laughed, but the joke landed wrong. Not because it was funny, because in the quiet that followed, Connor didn't join in. His face didn't shift. There was no embarrassed smile, no playful retort. He simply nodded, almost as if the moment confirmed something only he already knew. That same evening, investigators would later show that Connor's searches had intensified. Conversions, dosages, timing. He wasn't just curious, he was calculating. The smoothie was a dry run. A probe to see how Betty would react, to test tolerance, to observe and record. For Betty, the episode was a puzzle she filed away. She was the kind of person who trusted people, who gave benefit of the doubt. She chalked it up to an odd slip-up, a bad recipe, an experiment gone wrong. She didn't suspect murder. Who could blame her? For Connor, however, the smoothie confirmed feasibility. It told him that a taste test could be masked, that suspicion could be deflected with a joke, that poison could be administered and dismissed as a kitchen mishap. The failed smoothie was small, but it changed everything. It moved his plan from theoretical research into real-world testing, and it set the stage for what would come next. August 15th, 2023, the night everything changed. Betty had made plans with friends that evening. Dinner, laughter, just a few hours to unwind after long hospital shifts. She texted them that she was on her way. But then another message came. "Change of plans," she wrote. "Connor surprised me with drinks tonight. I think he's trying to make things better." It sounded sweet, reconciliation, a husband trying to fix what was broken, only it wasn't that. It was the final act. In their quiet Minnesota home, Connor set out 2 glasses, whiskey for him, rum for her. Friends later said this gesture was completely out of character. Connor never made drinks, never created moments like this. But Betty wanted to believe it was a peace offering. She cancelled her plans, stayed home, and smiled when he handed her the glass. For a brief moment, she probably felt hope. The fragile kind that makes you forget every argument, every hurt, every warning sign. What she didn't know was that the rum in her glass wasn't just alcohol. Mixed into it was a colorless, odorless toxin, colchicine, the same drug Connor had ordered using his work email just days before. It's tasteless, undetectable, and when consumed, it mimics food poisoning until it's too late. She drank it slowly, unaware that every sip carried a carefully measured lethal dose. Connor watched her, calmly, quietly, studying her like a case report. Hours passed. Then around 2 a.m., Betty woke up violently ill, vomiting, shaking, struggling to breathe. She thought it was something she ate, or maybe that strange smoothie from a few days ago finally catching up to her. Connor played his part perfectly, the concerned husband, rushing to her side, offering water, rubbing her back. He told her it was probably just a stomach bug. What he didn't say was that he knew exactly what was happening inside her. He knew her organs were already beginning to shut down. He knew because he had planned it that way. By sunrise, Betty's condition had worsened. Her texts to friends were short, confused. "I've been sick since 2 a.m, can't stop vomiting." They told her to rest, to go to the hospital if it got worse. Connor agreed, calmly offering to drive her, keeping his mask perfectly in place. That morning, they walked into Mayo Clinic's St. Mary's Hospital together, the same hospital where both of them worked, where Betty had saved countless lives. No one there could have guessed that the man holding her hand was the one who put her in that hospital bed. For the next few days, doctors fought to save her. Connor smiled politely, answered questions, and quietly logged into her medical chart from the staff portal. He wasn't helping. He was monitoring, making sure no one found the truth too soon. Betty Bowman, bright, kind, endlessly trusting, had no idea her final hours were being watched by the man she had once promised forever to. When Betty arrived at Mayo Clinic's St. Mary's Hospital, she thought she was finally safe, surrounded by colleagues, doctors, and machines she trusted. Her symptoms looked simple at first: nausea, dehydration, and unbearable stomach pain. The staff suspected food poisoning. It made sense. She'd eaten dinner, gotten sick overnight, and nothing pointed to foul play. At her bedside, Connor played his role flawlessly. He held her hand, stroked her hair, asked careful clinical questions, just like a doctor would. Nurses described him as calm, composed, and helpful. He didn't panic, didn't raise his voice. He just stayed there watching. No one questioned it. Why would they? He was one of them, a Mayo Clinic resident, a man of science. He spoke their language, but what the nurses didn't know was that Connor was logging into Betty's medical records over and over again from the staff portal. While she lay suffering, he monitored every lab result, every note, every adjustment in her treatment. When doctors couldn't identify the cause, Connor suggested a diagnosis, a rare condition called hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis, or HLH. It mimicked the same symptoms he had caused. The suggestion sounded credible. It was smart. Too smart. Tests were ordered. The results were inconclusive, of course, because Betty didn't have HLH. What she had was poison coursing through her veins. Over the next 48 hours, her body began to fail. Her organs shut down one by one. Her colon developed necrotic tissue, parts of it dying from the inside. The surgeons tried everything: fluids, medications, even emergency surgery. Nothing worked. All the while, Connor stayed beside her, updating family members, comforting friends, acting the part of the grieving husband before there was even a reason to grieve. Staff members later said his composure seemed unnatural, but at the time they read it as medical professionalism. In reality, it was detachment, the same clinical distance he'd used when researching toxins and calculating doses. And even as Betty's heart struggled to keep beating, Connor was messaging women on dating apps, calling himself a widower. Betty Bowman, who'd spent her life helping strangers heal, was now dying, surrounded by her colleagues, and by the man who had put her there. On August 20th, 2023, after days of agony, Dr. Betty Jo Bowman took her final breath. She was just 32 years old. The official cause, at first glance, seemed ordinary: organ failure following a severe illness. But the truth was anything but ordinary. Within hours of her death, Connor's focus shifted, not to mourning, but to control. He demanded that Betty's body be cremated immediately, telling hospital staff she didn't want to be a cadaver. His insistence was strange, almost desperate. He pushed for paperwork, calling funeral homes, and tried to block any autopsy from being performed. For a grieving husband, his urgency made no sense. But for a killer trying to erase evidence, it made perfect sense. Yet just as the ashes were about to replace the body, a phone call came in, an anonymous tip to the Southeast Minnesota Medical Examiner's Office. The voice on the line sounded certain. They said the Bowmans were on the verge of divorce, that Connor had cheated, and that Betty's death didn't feel natural. That single call stopped everything. Dr. Elizabeth Weiser, the medical examiner, immediately froze the cremation order. Betty's body would be preserved for a full autopsy and toxicology review. When the news reached Connor, his mask began to crack. The calm, composed doctor grew quiet, distant, but still tried to appear helpful. He didn't know it yet, but the truth was no longer buried with Betty. The clock had turned. The same precision he used to plan the perfect murder was about to turn against him. The first break in the case came from an unexpected place: the University of Kansas. Officials there contacted Rochester police, after noticing suspicious internet activity from a device once assigned to Dr. Connor Bowman. The searches, chillingly specific. Colchicine toxicity, sodium nitrate lethal dose. How to destroy internet history permanently. They weren't random curiosities. They were the research notes of a killer who thought science could hide murder. Detectives immediately reached out to Captain Casey Moylanen of the Rochester Police Department, a veteran investigator with over 2 decades on the job. Moylanen had seen strange deaths before, but something about this one didn't sit right. He ordered Connor's devices seized. What they found inside would redefine the word premeditation. 15 devices, laptops, tablets, hard drives, phones. From them, digital forensics teams extracted nearly 9 terabytes of data. 9 terabytes. That's more evidence than most murder cases generate in their entirety. Every click told a story. Every search, a confession. Investigators built a digital timeline that revealed 10 days of planning and years of cold detachment. They found his Google searches, his dosage calculations, even his chat logs with women on dating apps while Betty was still alive. In one profile, he listed himself as a widower. He was already living the lie he had built her death around, but it didn't end there. Police uncovered financial records showing Connor had been bragging about an upcoming life insurance payout, more than $450,000. At his home, they found the bank deposit slip. At his work email, the receipt for the $50.20 colchicine purchase. At his phone, search terms like how to make poisoning look natural. The walls were closing in, and yet he kept pretending. When questioned, Connor remained polite, even cheerful. He attended Betty's memorial service. He talked about her in past tense with mechanical precision. But behind that calm exterior, investigators saw something else. A man meticulously trying to clean up. Deleted files. Wiped devices. But nothing truly disappears. Every digital footprint he left, from the dosage conversion for 120 pounds to kilograms, to the timestamp of his package delivery, was still there, preserved in what one detective later called a forensic goldmine. Meanwhile, Dr. Elizabeth Weiser's autopsy brought the final confirmation. Traces of colchicine were found in Betty's tissues. She'd never been prescribed the drug, and suddenly everything clicked. The fake diagnosis, the immediate cremation request, the calm demeanor, the sudden wealth. It was all part of the same calculation. By October 2023, the evidence file was thick enough to collapse a desk. Detectives moved in. Connor Bowman, husband, doctor, poison specialist, was placed under arrest during a quiet traffic stop. He didn't resist, didn't flinch. He just asked for a lawyer and stared straight ahead. For investigators, that silence said it all. October 20th, 2023, after weeks of investigation, digital warrants, and forensic confirmation, the Rochester Police Department made their move. It was a gray Minnesota morning when unmarked units quietly surrounded a residential neighborhood. Officers waited for the right moment. No chase, no spectacle, just precision. At exactly 8:17 a.m., they pulled over a silver sedan. Behind the wheel sat Dr. Connor Fitzgerald Bowman. The arrest was swift. He didn't resist, didn't panic. He simply adjusted his glasses, looked at the officer and said, "Am I under arrest?" He was Connor Bowman, respected doctor, husband and poison control specialist, was taken into custody and charged with second-degree murder for the death of his wife, Dr. Betty Jo Bowman. The bail? $5 million. As the news broke, the medical community at Mayo Clinic fell silent. No one could believe it. The charming young resident who used to give pharmacology presentations was now accused of using that same knowledge to kill. For detectives, the moment was bittersweet. They had their man, but they also had to face the chilling reality that this wasn't an impulsive act. This was premeditation wrapped in professionalism. Later that same day, Dr. Elizabeth Weiser, the medical examiner, officially ruled Betty's death a homicide. The lab report confirmed it. Fatal colchicine poisoning. When police confronted Connor with the findings, his demeanor never cracked. No tears, no outrage, just silence. The same unsettling calm he'd shown in the hospital. Meanwhile, Betty's family was left shattered. Her sister Brianna wrote, "Poison was not the way you were supposed to go. You were so patient, so kind, and so understanding to him." Her mother, Nancy Sponsel, began the painful trip from Kansas to Minnesota, the start of a long fight for justice. At home, police discovered the proof of motive. The $450,000 life insurance policy Connor had been boasting about to women online. Even before Betty's death, every message, every search, every lie, all led to one truth. The brilliant doctor who swore an oath to save lives had instead perfected the science of taking one. When news of Connor's arrest reached Kansas, Betty's family could hardly process it. Her mother, Nancy Sponsel, packed her bags and began the long drive to Minnesota. She wasn't coming for answers. She already knew them in her heart. She came for justice. Betty's sister Brianna posted the words that broke thousands of hearts online. "Poison was not the way you were supposed to go. You were so patient, so loving, so undeserving of this." Their family's home in Wichita turned into a memorial of photographs, flowers, and Betty's favorite songs. Even her corgi, Sir Crumpet II, sat quietly beside the door for days, waiting for her to come home. As prosecutors reviewed the evidence, the sheer level of premeditation stunned them. On January 5, 2024, a grand jury reconvened. After hours of testimony and digital reconstruction, the charges were upgraded to first-degree premeditated murder. The reason was clear. Connor hadn't just lost control. He had planned every detail. The calculations, the purchase, the fake diagnosis, the cremation order. All of it pointed to intent. First-degree murder in Minnesota carries life in prison without parole. For Connor, it meant he would never walk free again. In court, reporters described him as expressionless. He sat there, back straight, hands folded, eyes fixed on nothing. No emotion when the charges were read. No reaction when Betty's name was mentioned. Just silence, the kind that chills you more than an outburst ever could. But Betty's story didn't end in that courtroom. Her friends from the Mayo Clinic started a scholarship in her name for pharmacy students who represent kindness and compassion in healthcare. Her colleagues began wearing pins with her initials. Her family, despite their grief, vowed that her light would not be defined by her death, because Betty Bowman was more than a victim. She was a healer, a friend, and a reminder that even in the darkest stories, goodness still echoes. And sometimes that echo becomes justice. She saved lives. He took one. In the end, Dr. Betty Jo Bowman became a symbol of what's both beautiful and fragile about trust, how love can blind us to danger, and how evil can hide behind intelligence and charm. Her story isn't just about a crime. It's about awareness, because behind every perfect smile, every Instagram post, every quiet home, there can live a truth we don't want to see. Betty's kindness didn't fail her. The world failed her by not asking the questions sooner. And if you take anything from this story, let it be this. Protect your peace, listen to your instincts, love deeply but never blindly. I'm your host, and this was The Guilty Crime Stories. If Betty's story moved you, share it, so her name, her light, and her legacy never fade. Subscribe for more true stories that reveal what hides beneath the surface, where guilt, truth, and justice finally meet.